The movie begins with a dramatic and action-packed sequence. It starts with a drug smuggling operation being conducted by a Cuban gang on a boat. The Miami Police Department has been monitoring the operation, and they launched a high-stakes raid to intercept the shipment. The team received a comprehensive briefing, outlining their roles and objectives. Once the briefing concluded, they dispersed to their designated positions. Detectives Mike Lowrey and Marcus Burnett were integral members of the tactical team tasked with executing the high-stakes raid. Disguised as cult members, they seamlessly blended in with the drug dealers, who were engrossed in their operation. At the opportune moment, they drew their guns and commanded everyone to freeze, initiating their bold move. As the confrontation escalated, one dealer grabbed Marcus, holding a gun to his head, while others aimed at Mike and Marcus. The man demanded Mike drop his gun, but Mike stayed unfazed. Amid the tense threats and taunts, Mike sensed the critical moment and initiated a shootout. Chaos erupted as shots were exchanged, and the backup force approached from the water. During the gunfire, Mike saw a man advancing towards Marcus. Acting swiftly, he aimed and shot, the bullet hitting Marcus in the rear before striking the threat's neck. After the shootout, Mike approached Marcus, who dramatically exclaimed he had been shot in the ass. Mike, bewildered, admitted he couldn't say for sure he was the one who shot Marcus, but acknowledged someone had. Two other cops approached, joking that Mike should kiss Marcus's wound to make it feel better. Mike checked the wound, reassuring Marcus it was not serious. The officers commented on the minimal results of such a large operation, mentioning the significant shipment of ecstasy they were after. Back at his house, Johnny angrily confronted his men about the police intercepting his mules. He was relieved they hadn't found his drugs on Dixie 7 and ordered a change to the boat schedule. In a helicopter, Marcus vented his frustrations to Mike, pointing out his real-world responsibilities compared to Mike's trust fund. Mike, having heard this before, lip-synced Marcus's words. Marcus continued, stating he wasn't in the job for thrills, but for his responsibilities. Mike acknowledged he shot Marcus, but insisted it was necessary to prevent worse outcomes. The scene shifts to a vibrant club where people are dancing energetically. Above the dance floor, a drug deal is taking place, and even the waitresses are involved in selling drugs. Meanwhile, Marcus is taken to the hospital. As they wheel him in, he and Mike continue their banter. Once Marcus is settled in a room, Mike, still fuming, makes a phone call. He contacts Icepick angrily. Mike, clearly upset, complains about the 2 bags of drugs, feeling humiliated in front of his associates. Icepick tries to calm him down, but Mike, furious, threatens Icepick, giving him 24 hours to find the missing ecstasy before he takes matters into his own hands. Simultaneously, Johnny calls the club owner, Alex, to confront him about the police bust on his mule. Alex, sounding nervous, admits he doesn't know where the police heat is coming from. Despite Alex's assurances that he has checked everything, the conversation is cut short when a guy in the club overdoses on ecstasy. Alex, seeing the situation escalate, orders his guards to get rid of the overdosing individual to avoid attracting more attention. The man was thrown outside and died immediately. Marcus was floating in his pool, while his sister Sydney and his wife Teresa were nearby. They all eventually went inside the house. When Mike arrived, Marcus went to let him in and shared an epiphany with Mike, noting that he realized Mike was an enigma sent by God to test him, but he wouldn't be broken by him. Marcus used his calming mantra, Woo-Sa. Inside, Mike saw Sydney. She ran up to him and kissed him, causing Mike to nervously tell her to behave. As they talked, it became clear that Mike had not yet told Marcus about his relationship with Sydney. Mike mentioned that Marcus knew about New York, but not about their involvement. Sydney emphasized that Mike needed to inform Marcus. Mike, aware of the tension, pointed out that timing was crucial since Marcus was currently unhappy with him. He suggested they wait until Marcus had fully healed from his recent injury. Sydney encouraged Mike to be brave, reminding him that Marcus was her brother, and that Mike needed to toughen up and handle the situation responsibly. Later, during a meal, Sydney mentioned New York, which confused Marcus because he hadn't told her that Mike was in New York. Sensing the tension, Teresa quickly tried to distract Marcus by suggesting that Mike show Sydney around since she was staying in town. Sydney then got up to leave. Marcus, feeling suspicious, called Mike aside and confronted him. He accused Mike of always trying to take over, especially when it came to his family. Mike, confused, asked what Marcus was talking about. Marcus reiterated that this was his family and his place of peace. Their exchange was interrupted when Marcus called his dog, Mason, to fetch something. Mason, however, was tied to the pool, and as he ran, the pool structure broke, causing a flood of water. Mike started laughing at the chaotic scene. At that moment, Mike received a call. He turned to Marcus, telling him to dry off. Mike informed him that Icepick had warned about the Haitian Zoe Pounds planning a trip. It was time for them to move. The Miami Police Department started preparing for their next move. Meanwhile, Sydney went undercover, disguised as a drug dealer, to meet with Alex. Upon seeing her, Alex acknowledged her reputation from New York, noting her impressive work with their Russian associates there. Sydney instructed Alex and his men to get inside, which they did without hesitation. As she was counting the money, she noticed some was missing. She confronted one of Alex's men, leading to a brief argument. Later, Alex, curious about her background, asked how many jobs she had done with his friends in New York. Sydney replied that she had done quite a few. He then reminded her that how she treated him had broader implications, affecting many people. She pointed out that he had sought her out, not the other way around. Sydney emphasized the importance of her role, explaining that she needed to convert small bills into larger ones and deliver them to a third party. She warned Alex that if the delivery was late, it would be his problem, not hers. Sydney meticulously explained how everything would work, but Alex struggled to keep up with the complex numbers and logistics. After she left, one of Alex's men approached him, expressing frustration. He complained that they were giving away too much, bearing all the risks, while their suppliers took too large a cut of the profits. The man suggested they call the general. Alex agreed and decided to make the call. Mike and Marcus were in their car, patrolling the area with the rest of the team, also surveilling nearby. As they watched, they saw 3 men approach the van. Sydney was in. The men killed the driver, prompting Sydney to shoot one of them in self-defense. She quickly closed the door and started the car, but 2 of the men managed to jump onto her vehicle. Sydney drove erratically, managing to shake off one of them, but the other clung on. She headed for a bridge, and with a daring maneuver, caused the man to fall from the bridge along with the door. As she drove past, Marcus recognized that it was Sydney driving and alerted Mike. They quickly jumped into action to follow her. Sydney was under heavy fire from a pursuing car, which led to a high-speed chase. The chase ended abruptly when Sydney crashed into another car, blocking the entire traffic lane. Mike, in hot pursuit, drove straight into the chaos, using the crash as cover to exchange gunfire with the attackers. Sydney managed to shoot one of the men approaching her and started her car again. Another attacker stole a truck to continue the pursuit, with Mike and Marcus following close behind. The man in the truck began releasing cars from the truck bed, creating obstacles on the road. Mike skillfully dodged the falling vehicles, though several police cars exploded in the process. Eventually, Sydney managed to lose her pursuers and pulled over. Marcus, catching up to her, demanded to know what was going on. Sydney explained she was undercover and had DEA agents watching her back, asking them not to jeopardize her case. Marcus was upset, feeling betrayed by Sydney's secrecy, but Mike tried to calm him down. He asked Sydney if there were drugs in the truck, but she revealed it was cash instead. She couldn't disclose where it was going due to protocol. Marcus, feeling hurt, reminded Sydney that he was her big brother and accused her of being reckless. Mike tried to mediate, acknowledging Marcus's point and emphasizing the importance of professional courtesy. He praised Sydney for handling herself well during the confrontation, despite the chaos. Just then, 2 men approached and stole the car with the money. Sydney, realizing the urgency, told Mike she had to go and quickly left to continue her mission. Back at the station, Captain Conrad was waiting for Mike and Marcus, visibly furious. He demanded to know their job description, emphasizing that they were part of the tactical narcotics team, with the keyword being tactical. Captain Conrad acknowledged the positive, that no cops had died, but pointed out the negative. The police commissioner was so angry, he felt the pressure. He asked for their side of the story. Marcus began explaining that he was at a family barbecue. Mike continued saying they got a tip about the Zoe Pounders planning a hit on cash or drugs from a big-time ecstasy dealer. Marcus interjected to clarify that they knew what an ecstasy dealer was, as Conrad, being the captain, would too. Conrad sarcastically asked if they had retrieved the drugs or the money, to which they both responded negatively. When he inquired about the identity of the dealer, Mike admitted they didn't know, but were determined to find out. Conrad, exasperated, noted that all their actions seemed to have been for nothing. Mike attempted to show that the DEA was involved, pointing out their presence at the scene. Conrad, frustrated, asked why they hadn't consulted him about the DEA's involvement. Marcus tried to calm him down by suggesting he remember his pressure points and do his exercises. Conrad, trying to regain composure, asked where they should go from there. Mike and Marcus theorized that since the Zoe Pounders knew when and where to hit the drop, they likely knew where the cash was. They planned to find the cash to uncover the dealer's identity. Conrad, tired of playing games, emphasized that he had 3 critically injured cops and kids dying from potent ecstasy. He demanded that Mike and Marcus do whatever it takes to stop these criminals from taking over the city. At his house, Johnny saw rats eating his cash and angrily shot at them. He turned to Roberto, expressing his frustration, saying it was a ridiculous problem to have but still a significant one. Roberto tried to explain the situation, mentioning that a black woman working for the Russians had been a maniac, but had managed to save Johnny's money. She had taken out some Haitians and delivered the load to the drop point. He also mentioned that Roberto had seen 2 crazy guys involved in a chase and shootout. Johnny reminisced about the old days when he didn't have such problems. Back then, he could simply fly the drugs in and ship the money out. He complained that American security had become so tight, both over the water and in the sky, that he couldn't move his money without attracting attention. Now, he had to deal with rats eating his money before he could even get it to Cuba. He saw the chase on TV and pointed out that he couldn't even get his money across town without making the news. Johnny asked Roberto if he should be worried. Roberto tried to reassure him, but Johnny cut him off. He asserted his dominance, declaring that he owned the town and wouldn't tolerate anyone challenging his control. Marcus and Mike walked into a store to talk to Icepick, frustrated about the outcome of their recent bust. They mentioned that they had only managed to get 2 lousy bags. Icepick, ever the opportunist, brought up his brothers, specifically a Haitian with blonde dreads. He informed Marcus that this man, Blondie Dread, was very expensive, and that Marcus and his partner would have to do something in return. Sensing the tension, Marcus and Mike decided to play along. They claimed to be part of the Miami PD tandem dance team, jokingly stating they had won all the local talent shows and were thinking about going national. They offered to show Icepick some of their routine. As they pretended to warm up, Marcus began breaking things in the shop, causing chaos. Icepick, panicking, tried to stop them, but they continued their act, making a mess of the place. Finally, in a desperate attempt to make them stop, Icepick revealed that Blondie Dread lived in a pink house 8 blocks away on Carl Street. Marcus and Mike went to the location they were given. They broke inside and immediately several shots were fired at them. They quickly took cover. Mike and the man with blonde dreadlocks exchanged insults, and soon a fierce gunfight ensued. Eventually, they managed to subdue the attackers and find the man they were looking for. Marcus started interrogating him, asking if he knew anything. When the suspect didn't cooperate, Marcus suggested asking his associates. Marcus went to a dead man and pressed further, asking who was driving the black Suburban. The man they were interrogating insisted he didn't know anything, pointing out that he didn't handle surveillance, but that someone else did, who never let anyone touch his camera. Intrigued, Mike asked what was on the camera. They decided to take the camera to a nearby TV shop to review the recordings. As they started going through the footage, Marcus began venting his frustrations. Unbeknownst to them, their conversation was being broadcast on every TV in the shop. Once they realized their conversation was being overheard, they quickly wrapped up and left the store. They sought the help of an IT technician to get more information. The technician explained that Palm Mortuary was owned by an offshore holding company. After digging, he found that it was registered to Donna Maria Johnny, the mother of Hector Juan Roberto Johnny, who goes by Johnny. Mike and Marcus realized they were dealing with Johnny, a notorious figure who had a history of suing the police department for wrongful arrest and winning. Just last year, he was awarded $9 million and got several officers fired. However, Mike and Marcus were undeterred, eager to find out what was happening in Johnny's house. They asked the technician to tap Johnny's phone. The technician pointed out that such an act would be highly illegal without a judge's approval. Mike and Marcus suggested framing it as a training operation. When the technician hesitated, they sweetened the deal by offering tickets to a Miami Heat game. With that settled, the technician got to work. Marcus and Mike went to Johnny's house disguised as pest control workers. Roberto let them in and took them to the roof, where they saw the rats. They tried to convince him to let them check other parts of the house. After some persuasion, Roberto agreed and left. Marcus and Mike then decided to split up and plant their surveillance equipment. Downstairs, Alex and Johnny were talking. Alex admired the house, but Johnny mentioned it belonged to his mother and that he now has a new house in Cuba. Mike excused himself, saying he needed to get materials. He sneaked into the living room and started planting the wires, while Marcus did the same elsewhere. Mike turned off the camera to avoid detection. Roberto noticed the camera issue and went to check, finding it unplugged. He saw Mike's tools on the ground and realized something was wrong. While Johnny and Alex were sitting, dust fell from the roof. Johnny brushed it off, blaming the rats. Alex then asked about Johnny's partner, and Johnny asked for him to be brought in. One of his men brought Johnny's partner, who had been mutilated and placed in a bucket. Johnny threatened Alex, expressing anger and mentioning that he would take violent action against Alex and his family if provoked. He ended by emphasizing the importance of friendship, trust, and honor, stating that without these values, they were no more than beasts. Mike went to the kitchen and found it covered in blood. He discovered a finger there. As he was informing Marcus about his discovery, Roberto arrived. Mike hit Roberto on the head and ran away. Marcus also got down, and they escaped together. Johnny confronted Roberto, asking how it happened. Roberto explained that he had called pest control, but they turned out to be imposters. Johnny, angry about the danger posed to his mother and daughter, shot Roberto in the head. Johnny's mother saw Roberto on the ground through the window and asked what had happened to him. Johnny told her that Roberto had unalived himself. Mike and Marcus returned to their station. Mike handed over the finger he found for a scan. They resumed their usual banter with the two officers they often argued with. Meanwhile, Johnny gathered all his men and ordered them to find out who the two intruders were. He wanted them captured and brought to him, insisting they be brought to him. They discovered the identity of the finger's owner. Mike informed Marcus that it belonged to Joseph Kuninskevich, a lieutenant in the Russian mob who owned several nightclubs in Florida. It seemed that Johnny was starting to target Russian mob bosses. The IT technician shared his findings. Using a special computer program he developed, he matched shredded paper fragments to reveal a photo of a boat named Dixie 7, registered to Floyd Petit, one of the KKK members they had previously arrested. The officer joked about an incident where Mike had blown off Floyd's ear and asked Mike to teach him how to shoot people. They also listened to a recording from Johnny's place, where the second-in-command mentioned that they were emptying fat does, which puzzled them. Johnny had a meeting scheduled for that afternoon. An unfamiliar voice, likely Johnny's, set up a meeting at the Shore Club at 2 p.m. Mike, Marcus, and their team prepared to head to the Shore Club, ready for the next step in their investigation. Meanwhile, Sydney was undercover with Johnny. She ordered a couple of Bacardi mojitos and engaged in casual conversation. Observers zoomed in on the scene and increased the audio to listen in. Johnny suggested they go for a swim to cool off, but Sydney countered with the idea of staying and drinking more. Johnny, suspicious, hinted at wanting to know if she was wearing a wire, and he took her to the water. As they went into the water, Johnny expressed his desire for Sydney to work for him. Sydney asked why he needed another banker, to which Johnny explained that he now owned all the Russian clubs and was about to become the biggest importer and distributor of ecstasy in North America. He assured her that she would become very rich by joining him. Sydney responded confidently, implying she understood his intentions and was willing to do business, as long as he didn't push too far. Johnny agreed, and they prepared to finalize their arrangement. Marcus and Mike went to see Sydney. When she saw them, she immediately confronted them, accusing them of jeopardizing her undercover case by being there. Marcus and Mike insisted that it was too dangerous for her to be working with Johnny. They told her about what they saw at his house. Sydney argued that she was very close to cracking the case and revealed that she was in charge of Johnny's money laundering operations. Marcus pressed her to understand the gravity of the situation, pointing out that Johnny's entire operation was at stake. He challenged her to realize the danger she was in. Mike explained that they had a contact who could give them crucial information about the transport end of Johnny's operation. They offered Sydney a chance to join them in this new lead. Later, once they were alone, Marcus and Mike went to prison to talk to a man they had arrested before. As they waited, Marcus expressed his displeasure with bringing Sydney into their operation. Mike argued that it was safer to keep an eye on her if she was with them. The man they were waiting for arrived, and they asked him about Johnny, but he refused to snitch. Mike, Marcus, and Sydney then went together to follow their lead. Marcus noticed Mike and Sydney talking closely and grew suspicious, commenting that they should avoid flirting. Sydney urged Mike to tell Marcus about New York, and Marcus overheard, demanding to know what they were discussing. Mike, forced to come clean, began to beat around the bush, but Sydney interrupted and revealed that they had gone out on 5 dates and were now seeing each other. Mike started apologizing, but Marcus responded sarcastically, growing angrier. Mike, also getting furious, asked why it was a problem for him to date Sydney. Marcus retorted that Mike wasn't good enough for his sister. Their argument heated up, but they were interrupted by the arrival of the shipment they were tracking. They turned their attention to the task at hand and saw the shipment moving. They quickly took a car and followed it, while Sydney decided to stay behind to avoid blowing her cover. As they followed the shipment, Carlos noticed them and alerted Johnny, who ordered his men to finish them. Carlos directed everyone to split up, but Mike and Marcus continued their pursuit of one of the trucks. The chase led them onto train tracks, with cadavers falling from the truck and onto the street. They dodged the bodies but began receiving fire from above, causing them to crash into a building and break into an office. A chaotic firefight ensued, with civilians screaming and running. Mike and Marcus saw the car they were following was empty, but then spotted the driver running away. They chased him into a subway, with Mike managing to catch up just in time. Marcus hung onto the outside of the train, while Mike and the man started fighting inside. The struggle continued until they stumbled out of the train, and during the fight, Mike pushed the man onto the tracks, killing him. Later, Marcus and Mike found out that the bodies they had been pursuing were empty, intended for research. Other officers began to mock them, pointing out the mistake and making jokes about the situation. Captain Conrad arrived, visibly furious. He chastised them for their actions, sarcastically imagining their morning conversation about how to mess up his day. He ranted about the consequences of their recklessness, highlighting the chaos it caused with forensic teams and detectives having to deal with the mess. Despite the tension, Marcus pointed out that these weren't normal corpses and explained that they had been emptied by a drug smuggler who owned a mortuary. He suggested that Johnny had the perfect cover for smuggling drugs using these bodies. Marcus, feeling disillusioned, confided in Mike that he was re-evaluating his priorities and considering leaving the partnership. He revealed that he had already signed his transfer papers, and once they nailed Johnny, their partnership would be over. Later, Mike visited Marcus at home. A young man arrived to take Marcus's daughter, Maggie, out on a date. Marcus and Mike, ever the protective father and uncle figures, threatened the young man, making it clear he needed to treat Maggie with respect. Just as they were finishing, Teresa and Maggie came out, and the young couple left. That night, Mike, Marcus, and their team went to infiltrate Johnny's mortuary. Inside, they discovered that Johnny was using cadavers and coffins to smuggle drugs and money in and out of the country. As they went through the bodies, they found money and drugs hidden inside, which disgusted Marcus to the point of vomiting. While they were there, they heard someone approaching. To divert attention, the team outside broke a window to create a distraction. Marcus hid with one of the bodies, while Mike took cover in a nearby room. During the chaos, Marcus was accidentally wheeled away with the body he was hiding with. Mike called for backup, and the officers outside drove an ambulance right to the mortuary, creating a bigger distraction and giving Marcus and Mike a chance to escape. Later, they went to the captain's house to report their findings. Mike noticed that Marcus seemed unusually euphoric and realized he was high. He warned Marcus not to mess things up as they entered the house. Inside, Marcus started complimenting the house excessively, acting strangely. Mike shared their discoveries with the captain, detailing how Johnny was smuggling drugs and money. Meanwhile, Marcus wandered around the house, eventually going upstairs and returning dressed in the captain's robe. The captain, noticing Marcus's odd behavior, asked what was going on. Mike admitted that Marcus had ingested ecstasy during the operation. The next day, the police force assembled to raid Johnny's house. Johnny, having discovered their identities, also found out about Sydney's undercover role. He confronted her with a gun, enraged by the betrayal. Meanwhile, Mike and Marcus returned to the mortuary only to find it empty. Realizing that Johnny was already transporting his money to Cuba, they quickly assessed the situation. Elsewhere, officers encountered Alex, who was armed and about to shoot. They acted swiftly, shooting him first and killing him. Mike and Marcus boarded a helicopter to search for Johnny's shipment. While navigating the area, they spotted a boat and started following it. Despite their orders to stop, the people on the boat refused. Mike and Marcus opened fire, causing the boat to break down and stop. Upon boarding, they found a casket filled with money hidden under a body. During this time, Marcus received a call from Johnny, demanding his money and revealing that he had Sydney. Back at the office, the captain informed them that Johnny's jet had been located in Cuba, but emphasized that the United States does not negotiate with hostage takers. Frustrated, Marcus stormed out of the room, with Mike following to reassure him that they would handle it themselves. Other detectives joined them, expressing their willingness to help rescue Sydney. Together, they embarked on a mission to bring back Sydney. The team was inserted by the Coast Guard a few miles off the coast of Cuba. There, they rendezvoused with fellow officer Vargas's brother Tito, who led the local Alpha 66 underground resistance. Tito provided the team with weapons, access to a tunnel network, and detailed maps of Johnny's new mansion. Everyone took their positions and sneaked inside Johnny's mansion. Marcus and Mike hid in a casket to move undetected. They also sent in a camera attached to a toy car for surveillance, but the guards discovered it. Seeing no other options, they detonated the toy car, causing a fierce exchange of gunfire. Amidst the chaos, they fought their way through the mansion and finally reached the room where Sydney was being held. She joined them, but they realized they wouldn't be able to reach the tunnels as planned. With no choice but to go through the front door, they encountered Johnny's men all over the place. A massive shootout ensued as they made their way outside, dodging bullets and crashing through various obstacles. They led the gang on a high-speed chase through the streets, causing chaos and destruction along the way. Eventually, they reached the border and stopped their car as soon as they crossed onto American soil. Johnny and his men quickly surrounded them, demanding they drop their weapons. In a tense moment, Sydney dropped her gun onto a landmine, causing an explosion that threw the gang into disarray. Seizing the opportunity, Marcus made a daring shot, hitting Johnny in the head and neutralizing the threat. Mike rushed to Sydney and kissed her, relieved that they had made it through the ordeal. The movie concludes with Marcus and Mike floating in Marcus's pool, reflecting on their adventure. Marcus apologized, admitting he was happy that Mike was seeing his sister. However, their usual banter quickly resumed, leading to another argument. Marcus's dog ran by, causing the pool to break once again, and they ended up in the lake, laughing and bickering as always. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.